She was never meant to be a carrier. Born from the hull of a canceled battleship, the Kaga would rise to become one of the deadliest ships in the Imperial Japanese Navy, only to meet a devastating end in the most crucial battle of the Pacific War. In the aftermath of World War I, the great naval powers were locked in a dangerous and expensive arms race. Japan, eager to assert its dominance in the Pacific, envisioned a mighty 8-8 fleet. 8 battleships and 8 battlecruisers, all less than 8 years old. Central to this ambitious plan were the Tosa-class battleships. These were designed to be giants, displacing over 40,000 tons and armed with 10 massive 16-inch guns. 2 were laid down, Tosa and her sister ship Kaga. Kaga's keel was laid in July 1920 at the Kawasaki shipyard in Kobe. She was launched in November 1921, a hulking steel leviathan, seemingly destined for glory as a queen of the battle line. But destiny, as it often does, had other plans. The crippling cost of this naval arms race, coupled with a desire to prevent another global conflict, led to the Washington Naval Conference in 1921. The resulting Washington Naval Treaty, signed in 1922, threw a wrench into Japan's plans. It imposed strict limits on the number and size of capital ships. Battleships and battlecruisers under construction, including the Tosa-class, were ordered to be scrapped. Kaga, afloat but incomplete, was marked for destruction, destined to be used as a target ship. It seemed her story would end before it truly began. However, the treaty did allow for some existing battleship or battlecruiser hulls to be converted into aircraft carriers. Japan initially selected the Amagi-class battlecruisers, Amagi and Akagi, for this conversion. Kaga, meanwhile, awaited her fate. Then, on September 1, 1923, disaster struck. The Great Kanto earthquake, a devastating magnitude 7.9 event, ravaged the Tokyo-Yokohama area. Among its many victims was the battlecruiser Amagi, whose hull was irreparably damaged at the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal. With Amagi out of the picture, the Imperial Japanese Navy needed a replacement, and the still intact Kaga received an unexpected reprieve. Instead of becoming target practice, Kaga would become an aircraft carrier. The conversion began, but it was a journey into uncharted territory. Early aircraft carrier design was experimental, and Kaga, along with her near sister Akagi, became a testament to this era of trial and error. Completed in March 1928, the first iteration of Kaga was interesting. She featured a bizarre, multi-tiered flight deck arrangement. A main landing deck stretched for about 190 meters, 623 feet, but below and forward of that were 2 shorter flying-off decks. The idea was that different aircraft types could launch simultaneously from different levels. It sounds clever in theory, but in practice, it was deeply flawed. The lower decks were too short for the increasingly heavy aircraft entering service. Her appearance was equally unconventional. Instead of a distinct island superstructure, Kaga had a small pilot house tucked under the forward edge of the main flight deck. And her funnels? She had 2 enormous, horizontal funnels trunked down her starboard side, designed to discharge exhaust fumes away from the flight deck. While this kept the deck clear, it also meant a blistering hot corridor alongside the ship and a tendency to roast anyone unfortunate enough to be working nearby. She was slow, too, making only about 28 knots, 52 kilometers per hour, barely enough to generate the wind over deck needed for heavy aircraft launches. Her initial air group was about 60 aircraft. Kaga was a carrier, yes, but far from an ideal one. Kaga's first taste of action came during the Shanghai incident in early 1932. Operating alongside Akagi, Kaga's aircraft flew missions over China, marking the first combat deployment for the IJN's carriers. While they performed reasonably well, the operation highlighted the limitations of both Kaga and the early carrier aircraft, suffering notable losses. It was clear that Kaga, in her current form, was not up to the task of future naval warfare. Recognizing her shortcomings, the Imperial Japanese Navy decided on a radical overhaul. Between 1934 and 1935, Kaga underwent a massive reconstruction at the Sasebo Naval Arsenal. The multi-level flight decks, a failed experiment, were ripped out. In their place, a single, much longer flight deck was installed, extending almost the full length of the ship to 248.6 meters, 815 feet. This deck overhung the bow and stern, giving her a more conventional carrier profile. A small, starboard side island superstructure was finally added, improving flight operations control. The distinctive but problematic horizontal funnels were replaced with a single, large, downward curving funnel on the starboard side, similar to Akagi's later configuration. Internally, her propulsion systems were upgraded, increasing her speed to a more respectable 28.5 knots, 52.8 kilometers per hour, though still slower than contemporaries like the Soryu-class. Her armament was modernized, and most importantly, her aircraft capacity and handling facilities were significantly enhanced. She could now operate up to 90 aircraft, including the latest types like the Mitsubishi A-5M fighter, the Nakajima B-5N torpedo bomber, later known as the Kate, and the Ichi D-1A dive bomber. This reconstruction transformed Kaga from an awkward experiment into one of the most powerful aircraft carriers in the world. She emerged heavier, longer, and far deadlier. With her new lease on life, Kaga became a key player in the Second Sino-Japanese War, which erupted in 1937. She conducted extensive operations along the Chinese coast, launching strikes, providing air support, and refining the carrier tactics that Japan would later unleash upon the world. It was a brutal conflict, and Kaga's air groups gained invaluable combat experience, but also suffered losses, testing both men and machines. She spent more time in Chinese waters than any other Japanese carrier, becoming a hardened veteran of air warfare. As tensions with the United States escalated, Kaga joined forces with Akagi to form Carrier Division 1. These two veterans, alongside the newer carriers Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku, formed the core of the Kido Butai, the first air fleet, the most powerful carrier strike force on Earth. Under the command of Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, this force began intensive training for its most audacious operation yet, an attack on the heart of the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. On December 7, 1941, Kaga stood 230 miles, 370 kilometers north of Oahu. In the pre-dawn darkness, her flight deck thrummed with activity. Her first wave, including 26 Nakajima B-5N Kate bombers, some carrying torpedoes, others armor-piercing bombs, and 9 Mitsubishi A-6M-0 fighters, roared into the sky. Kaga's Kates, led by Lieutenant Commander Shigeharu Murata, targeted the battleships moored along Battleship Row. Her torpedo bombers slammed into the USS West Virginia, Nevada, Oklahoma, and Arizona. Her high-level bombers scored hits on the USS Tennessee and Maryland. Her second wave, consisting of 26 Ichi D-3A Val dive bombers, attacked Hickam Field and Ford Island Naval Air Station, further crippling American air power. Kaga's aircraft performed with deadly precision, contributing significantly to the devastating success of the attack. But crucially, the American carriers were not in port. In the euphoric months following Pearl Harbor, the Kido Butai swept across the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Kaga played her part. In January 1942, she supported the invasion of Rabaul in New Guinea, a key strategic base. Then, on February 19, 1942, Kaga participated in an attack that, while less famous than Pearl Harbor, was devastating in its own right: the bombing of Darwin, Australia. Kaga launched 27 Kates, 18 Vals, and 9 Zeros as part of a 188 aircraft raid. They caught Darwin completely by surprise, sinking 8 ships, including the American destroyer USS Peary, heavily damaging port facilities and shattering Australian morale. It was the largest single attack ever mounted by a foreign power against Australia. Kaga, the converted battleship, was now a symbol of Japan's seemingly unstoppable naval might. But the tide of war is fickle. Overconfidence, flawed planning, and a determined enemy would soon conspire to bring Japan's run of victories to a shuddering halt. The target was Midway Atoll, a tiny but vital American base in the Central Pacific. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of the combined fleet, hoped to lure the remaining American carriers into a decisive battle where he could annihilate them. Kaga, alongside Akagi, Soryu, and Hiryu, formed the spearhead of Nagumo's first air fleet, the bait in Yamamoto's trap. They sailed towards Midway, unaware that the Americans, thanks to brilliant code-breaking, knew they were coming. On the morning of June 4, 1942, Nagumo launched a 108-aircraft strike against Midway Island. Kaga contributed 18 VALs and 9 Zeros. While the attack damaged the base, it failed to neutralize its air power. The strike leader radioed back, recommending a second strike. This is where things began to unravel. Nagumo's carriers were holding a second wave in reserve, armed with torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs, ready for the American carriers they expected to find. Now, he faced a critical decision: launch the second wave against Midway or wait for the U.S. carriers. While debating, scout planes reported sighting American ships. Then came the dreaded news: an American carrier was present. Nagumo made the fateful decision to recover his Midway strike force and then rearm the reserve aircraft with anti-ship weapons before launching against the American carriers. This meant Kaga's flight deck and hangar decks became scenes of frantic, dangerous activity. Torpedoes were swapped for bombs, then bombs back for torpedoes. Fuel lines snaked across the decks. Aircraft were shuffled and respotted. It was organized chaos, and it left the Japanese carriers incredibly vulnerable, their decks packed with fueled, armed aircraft and unsecured ordnance. The Americans, meanwhile, were launching everything they had. First came the torpedo bombers, slow, vulnerable TBD devastators from the carriers Hornet, Enterprise, and Yorktown. Flying low and without adequate fighter cover, they were slaughtered by the Japanese Combat Air Patrol and anti-aircraft fire. Not a single torpedo found its mark from Hornets and Enterprise's squadrons. Yet, their sacrifice was not in vain. They drew the Japanese Zeros down to wave-top height, pulling them away from the carriers and leaving the skies above them wide open. Just as the last torpedo attack faded, high above, Lieutenant Commander C. Wade McCluskey, leading 32 Scout Bomber Douglas, SBD, Dauntless dive bombers from the USS Enterprise, spotted a lone Japanese destroyer, the Arashi, steaming north. The Arashi had been chasing off an American submarine and was now racing to rejoin Nagumo's fleet. McCluskey, low on fuel and unsure of the carrier's location, made a crucial decision: follow the destroyer. His gamble paid off. Moments later, the Kido Butai appeared below. McCluskey and his wingman, Lieutenant Commander Max Leslie from Yorktown, who arrived almost simultaneously, pushed their Dauntlesses over into near-vertical dives. Kaga, turning ponderously into the wind, became a primary target. Around 10 to 22 a.m., the Dauntlesses struck. Kaga, lacking the tight turning circle of Soryu or Hiryu, couldn't evade effectively. The first bomb, likely a 500-pound, 227 kilograms weapon, hit just aft of the rear elevator. It likely detonated among the rearming B-5N Kates, turning the hangar into an inferno. The second and third bombs struck near the forward elevator, one possibly hitting the island bridge, killing Captain Jisaku Okada and most of the command staff. The fourth bomb, a massive 1,000-pound, 454 kilograms weapon, tore through the flight deck amidships, exploding in the upper hangar. This hit was catastrophic. It detonated among fully fueled and armed aircraft, setting off a chain reaction of devastating explosions. Aviation fuel, bombs, and torpedoes cooked off, ripping the carrier apart from the inside. Kaga became a raging inferno. Dense black smoke billowed thousands of feet into the air. Fires raged uncontrollably, fed by fuel and ordnance. Her flight deck buckled and warped. Her water mains were ruptured, making firefighting impossible. Survivors described a scene of unimaginable horror, with the ship shuddering from internal explosions and the decks turning into a sea of fire. Despite valiant efforts by her crew, Kaga was doomed. The fires burned with such intensity that they couldn't be controlled. By late afternoon, it was clear she was lost. The order to abandon ship was given. Around 7:25 p.m., as the fires reached her forward fuel tanks, two more colossal explosions sealed her fate. She refused to sink quickly, so the destroyer Hagikaze was ordered to scuttle her. Two torpedoes slammed into Kaga's burning hull, and shortly after, the once mighty carrier, born from a battleship, slipped beneath the waves, taking over 800 of her crew with her. The loss of Kaga, along with Akagi, Soryu, and later Hiryu, in a single day, was a blow from which the Imperial Japanese Navy would never recover. It broke the back of its carrier fleet, cost it hundreds of irreplaceable veteran pilots and crewmen, and marked the definitive turning point of the Pacific War. For decades, Kaga lay undisturbed in the crushing depths of the Pacific. Then, in May 1999, a combined U.S. Navy and National Geographic expedition located some wreckage believed to be Kaga. But it wasn't until October 2019 that the main hull was definitively found. Paul Allen's research vessel Petrel, exploring the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, located Kaga sitting upright on the seabed at a depth of nearly 5,400 meters, 7,700 feet. The images revealed a hull heavily damaged, scarred by the inferno and explosions that consumed her, a silent testament to the fury of the Battle of Midway. It's a somber, deep-sea monument to a ship whose existence was a twist of fate, whose career burned brightly but briefly, and whose end signaled the beginning of an empire's downfall. Today, her name lives on in the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force's JS Kaga, an Izumo-class helicopter destroyer, itself being converted to operate F-35B stealth fighters. A carrier, once again, carrying the legacy of a name forged in treaties, fire, and the deep blue sea. Kaga's story is a powerful reminder that even the mightiest warships are vulnerable, that fate can change in an instant, and that history often hinges on single moments of decision and destruction. What do you find most fascinating about the Kaga's incredible journey? We hope you found this dive into the history of the IJN Kaga compelling. These deep dives take a lot of work, and if you want to keep uncovering these hidden stories, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next mission. We're always on the lookout for our next target, and we want to hear from you. What piece of military history, legendary machine, or untold story should we investigate next? Let us know in the comments. Your idea could be our next feature. Thanks for watching.